Good afternoon to you, Sewing Circle. I am coming to you live today to talk about the blind hem stitch on your machine because you do have to wrap your brain around it just a little bit. It's not as intuitive as you would think, but once you get the hang of it, it does a pretty good job of doing a nice blind hem. I'm going to show you on two different pieces of fabric. This one, which is going to represent a skirt. We're going to pretend that this is a skirt and we're going to do a blind hem on it. And then I made the bottom of a pant leg, quote unquote, and we're going to pretend that this is a pant hem, and we're going to do the hem on the bottom of this piece as well. So one thing you may have noticed here, maybe if I stick my hand in there and get it up close, I have pinked the edge of this fabric. And I've done the same on this piece as well, and maybe you can see that a little better on this piece. The reason I did that is because obviously you don't want fraying around the hem of anything, because then those strings hang out the bottom. You catch, if it's a pair of pants or a skirt, you might catch your toe on it and really do a big snag. So you want to finish that edge of your hem in some way. Now typically I do it on a serger. It's fast, easy, and I really like what the serger does and how it gives it a little bit more professional look. However, a pair of pinking shears is much cheaper than a serger, and so if you want to get a pair of pinking shears to do your hems, it will save you all sorts of headache and trial. So I hope that you can see up here that the blind hem stitch is kind of a zigzag every few stitches. I hope this is showing up. I can't tell from my screen, but I have about 4 or 5 straight stitches and then it takes a zigzag. 4 or 5 straight stitches and then it takes a zigzag. Some of them will also have like 4 or 5 small zigzags and then a big zag, 4 or 5 small zigzags and then a big zigzag. So something along those lines, that is what your blind hem stitch is going to look like. And if you don't have an electronic machine where you select it like this, it will be somewhere on your dial, probably right after your zigzag stitch selection. I'm going to lift you up here for just a second to look at my thread. So I have red fabric and I've chosen a red thread. I did not have a color to perfectly match this fabric. And one trick that I have learned when it comes to sewing and matching thread, if you cannot find a perfect match, then go one shade darker. Always darker, never lighter when you're selecting your thread. And so that's what I've done. I've gone a shade darker. That way, when the zigzag comes over and takes a tiny little stitch, it will not show up, as a little dot on the outside of your hem. Now the next thing that you need to do, you will have a foot, let's make sure, okay, a foot that looks something like this. And it will have an edge that you're going to use for when you zigzag, and it will have some kind of adjustment over here, because if you're taking too wide of a zigzag, it might take too much fabric, or too little of a zigzag, you won't catch the fabric at all. Now on my machine, I can also adjust the width of the zigzag to get it exactly where I want it to be. So I don't mess with my foot very often, but that is what this is for. It's going to move this little guide this way or this way, depending on how wide of a stitch you're taking, because if it takes too big of a stitch, you'll actually on the outside of your hem show a little bit of a line, and I will show you what that looks like, or what I mean by that. So I'm going to switch out my feet here and then get the thread. I always like to have my thread at about 2 o'clock out this direction, both the bobbin and the top thread. This is the skirt, and I want to show you on this first because I'm hoping you can see a little bit better what's going to happen. So you're going to take your hem, this is the edge of your hem, Here's the top of it. And you're going to fold it back like that. This is what is sometimes a little bit hard to wrap your head around. So this is my hem. It's inside out, wrong side is up. It's folded up here. This is the edge of the hem or the bottom of the skirt. And I am going to fold it like that. Okay. And then I want to get this to within, I don't know, 1/4 to 3/8 of an inch between this fold and the edge of my fabric. Then I place this under the foot, and this guide is going to go right along this edge. This guide, this red guide, is going to go right along this fold right here. And so we're going to take the 4 or 5 stitches on this fabric out here and then zigzag over to catch this fold. So I lower my presser foot, and hopefully you can see that that fold is right there along the red guide. I want to get this as straight as possible so that my stitches are out here, and then I'm going to zigzag over and catch this about every 4 or 5 stitches. I like to always use my needle down when I'm working with this, because if I have to stop and readjust, I don't want the fabric to slide under my foot. So I'm just going to get started. This is going to start on the zigzag, and I can already tell you might want to take your hand wheel and gently lower the needle so you can see how much fabric it's going to catch here. We're going to start out taking too much of a bite, and then I will show you the correct way to do it. So it's going to start with a zigzag, and then we're going to take 4 or 5 stitches over here and then zigzag. Okay. So this one I have done taking way too big of a bite out of my fabric. And let me show you what I mean by that. It went 5 stitches here, and then it zigzagged. And I don't know if you can see, but the fold of the fabric is right here, and I've got almost over a 1/16 of an inch V out of this fabric. And I don't want that because, oh, I should have done this in a contrasting color. But on the outside here, you probably can't see, but I have a little stitch that is about 1/8 of an inch long. There, there, and there. Now, on this design, it doesn't show up, but if you were doing a plain colored pair of pants, you're really going to see this tiny little stitch here, and it will really show up. In fact, I'm just going to change out my top thread really quick. This is going to illustrate my point a little bit better. So I'm going to start once again, start it at the beginning, always holding my threads for the first 3 or 4 stitches. Okay. Now you can better see what I'm talking about. Can you see now how you can see this little V into the fabric? It's taken too much of a bite out of the fabric right there. And now when I turn this right side out, hopefully you can see these black stitches here, which are about 1/8, maybe even 3/16 of an inch long. And so imagine if you're hemming a pair of pants, that's not a very blind hem. Okay. A couple of things that you can do. I can adjust how wide of a bite that this is taking out of my fabric. Let me just pull some of this out. Well, no. But if you can't, then what you want to do is adjust this. Now, since it was taking too big of a bite, we want to push this away so that it doesn't bite as much. And so I'm going to turn it just a little bit this direction. Also, I can adjust on mine how wide of a bite. So right now, when it zigzags over, it's coming over 4.5 millimeters. I'm going to go down to 4 millimeters. Also, you can see I was probably just a little bit close to the edge over here. I probably need to leave just a little bit more of this right here before the fold, just to get it a little bit smoother. So now I have made my adjustments. I'm going to start, and this is where, okay, if we're starting, you want to make sure that that is going to come down and hit the fabric, and it's not quite, so I'm going to back up this screw, whoops, just the tiniest amount, come down, and now we're taking just 1 or 2 threads of a bite out of this. And so now I feel much better. I will also tell you that going slowly with this particular stitch is going to get you your best results. It just is. You're less likely to move over too far. You're more likely to keep it a nice straight line. And so, okay. So now that I've done it, let me show you what it should look like. When this comes over, it should only be catching 1 or 2 threads at the very edge of the fabric. Now you run the danger of missing every once in a while, so check to make sure that you're catching. That one did catch, it looked like it missed, but you just have to be careful that you're catching. You're only going to catch 1 or 2 threads. Remember up here you could actually see the V. That's not what we want. We want it to just catch 1 or 2 threads. And then when I open this out, that hem is completely blind. And your presser foot might make a little bit of a crease in the fabric. Just go back lightly with your iron, touch that up, and you have a blind hem. Now I just wanted to show you on a pair of pants. It's the same thing. You will have to remove whatever kind of extension table you have on your machine. It might slide out this way, but you just want the arm of your machine. Again, we have our hem here. Here are our pant leg up here and the edge of the hem here. And so we're going to fold that backwards. So you're going to have the pants inside out and then fold them backwards that direction. Now I have about 3/16 of an inch, maybe a half inch. A half inch would be a little much here. If I'm doing pants, I like to start right here at the seam. And I'm going to lower my presser foot, start my pattern back over from the beginning. And because I'm using the same fabric, I'm pretty sure, but I'm just going to double check. Okay, that's hitting right where I want it to hit. And so we're going to now, my fabric is creasing funny. Stop and adjust. It's another reason why you want to go slowly. Just get these lying the way that they need to. They don't really want to lie that way because you've got it folded in kind of a Z shape here, so just stop and mess with it for a second. Okay, and then it's doing it again, so I just have to stop and play with it for a second. And you would do this all the way around the hem and back to the seam. I'll go ahead and do it the whole way so that you can see. Now, I'm getting a little bit of puckering here because you've taken a tube of the same size and tried to fold it inside, and so some of that has to go somewhere. Just kind of fiddle that with your fingers and ease it under the presser foot if you can. I'm going to lift my dual feed so that my feed dogs will do some of the work for me here. And that worked it out perfectly. Okay, so I've come right back to where I was. You don't need to reverse, just overlap for a couple of stitches, and that will hold it just fine. We're going to trim our threads. And then you need to go back and make sure that it has caught everything. Here it did not catch. So if you were putting on these pants and you caught that with your toe, you could rip the hem out of the pants. I don't sweat it too much because it's not going to show. I just go back to that spot and stitch over it, paying a little bit closer attention to make sure that it is catching. And that's all I needed to do. Now it's caught there. Clipping all of my threads. Just going to go on around, make sure that everything has indeed caught. So now when I turn my pants right side out, I have a perfectly blind hem. It does take a little bit of practice. Making a fake quote-unquote hem like this to practice on might be worthwhile, save you a little bit of headaches from time to time, but yeah, making a blind hem will give a nice professional look to the bottom of your garment. Better than, I mean, if you had a pair of pants other than jeans and you know, athletic wear, that kind of thing, you don't want to just stitch around the bottom and have it sew. You want it to be invisible. And so, you know, like that, you would have what's called a blind hem. So I hope you found this helpful. Thank you for joining me today. I hope you have a great afternoon, and let's get sewing.